Well, first of all, our brain is way faster than the way we process things psychologically. And that is not a problem. We don't have a brain problem. We usually have a cognitive problem regarding how we regulate the speed through which the brain processes stuff.
Right, yes.
Now, for example, if I feel depressed today, and sometimes we feel depressed without even knowing whether we have reasons to feel that way, or we just walk that way, and maybe the mood is maybe we're making stuff up, or maybe the mood is affected by dreams or nightmares we don't even remember when we wake. Or maybe it is the diet, or maybe it is whatever, some temporary chemical process going on. So we are so quick to name the sensation, and that is a mistake, because when we have a sensation, some people will call it a feeling. I like to call it sensation or perception.
Yes.
That, cognitively speaking, that means that we don't have yet enough data to comprehend what that sensation is all about. Therefore, what is the purpose of categorizing it? We are very quick in doing that. So, oh my God, I feel down.
Yeah.
That is a bunch of terms.
Yeah, you're right. Like, we shouldn't label it too quickly. We should question it. It should be phrased or framed as a question rather than as, a category, or categorizing it, labeling it as something. Because
That's right.
if we frame it as a question, then we're not jumping to conclusions. We're giving ourselves time to really analyze it and think about it.
Well, more or less 70% of what an average person says is useless.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I think it's actually higher. But, yeah.
Well, I personally know people that the 90% of what they say is completely useless.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they're stupid people. Well, some of them are, unfortunately. But that's not the point. No, the point is that why? Why do we open our mouth without making sure that the plug is connected between the mouth and the brain?
I think it's conditioning as well, and I think it's a kind of expectation, because my parents expect in the morning for, if I'm staying at their house, to wake up and say good morning to them and chat to them in the morning. They like that. They expect that. And I'm like, I don't want to start chatting and saying good morning. And yeah, as you say, it's really dull conversation, which is unnecessary. It's about the weather. It's about, I don't know, aches and pains, or how they slept, or it's just verbal noise.
For example, when we are in an environment where we are interfacing with many people simultaneously, and people say all sorts of stuff, not necessarily interesting stuff, small talk, kind of jokes, the typical situation. We don't actually have the time to think, because there is no silence, and we don't actually have the opportunity to take our time. So our brain is constantly stimulated to react. And also because culturally we are conditioned in a way that we have to say something for the sake of saying something. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when we engage in small talk with somebody, usually the average person, or actually almost everybody, we do not remain silent, because there is no purpose of listening, really. We are not interested in really what the person is saying. But we don't want to be mean. We don't want to look maybe arrogant. We don't want to look weird. So there is no actual listening. Often we are talking with people, we don't even listen to what they're saying because we are maybe busy in our personal and different thought processes or pictures or mental pictures. So all of that is actual noise. So particularly nowadays, we have so much information overload. Mm-hmm. In every sense, not only people, but information we come across with online. And the brain tries to process that very quickly. But what we call the mind doesn't have the time to evaluate what is necessary, what is not, and what is important, and if there is something important there or not. It's a psychological chattering. We almost always have there.
So, how does the psychological chattering arise? So you're saying the brain functions very fast, it's very quick, but the mind is much slower. And therefore, the brain's taking in a lot of information that the mind is not able to process that quickly. And so, therefore, is there a lot of interference, or what happens to all this information that the mind isn't able to process properly? What's going on there? Is that what's causing the chattering? And how would we deal with that then? If the mind is so quick, how would we? Sorry, not the mind, the brain. If the brain is so quick.
But we don't have any kind of training or educational training whatsoever aimed at well, first of all, first of all, acknowledging this problem, valuing the relevance of dealing with the problem, not fixing the problem because we can't, but dealing with the problem reasonably. We don't have any training. Now, it's not a brain problem, I repeat. The brain that we have the same brain we had 5,000 years ago. And it's a wonderful machine. And it is actually good that the brain processes information quickly, because without that we will not be able to survive. What we call the mind involves many things that are very sophisticated, such as, for example, the intellectual process. Animals, so far, they never develop a mimetic evolution, an evolution of meanings. Our brain, our mind, and our species developed not only genetic evolution but also mimetic evolution, which is important. Actually, this is without a mimetic evolution, we will not have our stabilization, we will not have science, we will not have all the benefits we have today, including human rights and morality and the life we have, and many other beautiful things, and also negative things, of course. Without mimetic evolution, we will not have the evolution of religious thinking, the evolution of ideologies. So there are pros and cons. Now, all of the stuff, the mimetic evolution, has to do with what we call the intellect, or intellectualizing things. In order to intellectualize something, that requires time. And we usually don't really value, also because we are not trained, we don't value that time and how to administer that time. And that's exactly why the 95% of the human population is made of people that believe in some kind of deity or some spiritual something, regardless of how intelligent or non-intelligent they are. So why? Of course, because they are conditioned, they are indoctrinated eventually, and so on. But fundamentally, that happens before they've never been trained, and also culturally, to value the time they invest and they need to process information, hopefully decently. And then some people understood that, but they came up with, meditative techniques, meditation and stuff that doesn't work and never worked because it's not what is required. So I think that in the first place, what is required is to really comprehend, even from a neurological viewpoint, that the brain processes info way quicker than the mind. So
Yes.
we cannot slow the brain down. Well, we do actually with drugs. That's why people drink. That's why people eventually smoke ganja all day or other drugs. That's why we develop drugs. Why have we developed? Why do we have an evolution of doping substances, drugs? What is this human propensity of somehow altering the brain computation of reality? Not only because it makes us feel good. It's not only because of that. That's true. But what is really more profoundly, why humans all over the world developed some kind of proneness to rely to drugs? Not drugs like coffee or something like psychotropic. I mean, drugs that are capable of altering the perception of reality. Why? And that has been going on. Well, since, I mean, all the known history, we had.
I think. I mean, I think it's the same reason for why religion has evolved and kind of emerged. It's also for us to try and deal with the fact that we're going to die, and we don't like that. So, in order to kind of cope with the fact that we're the only animals that know about our impending doom or death, we've come up with all these stratagems, which are like religion and then drugging ourselves to kind of forget, or to so that momentarily we don't have to think about that or be worried about that, and have that on our minds, because obviously that is something that's always at the back of the mind or in the brain about our own death. So I think that's why. I think that's probably one of the reasons. It's probably more complex than that, but I think that's a strong, because we've always, even from the beginning of time, I think even as probably cavemen, we were eating herbs or berries or the bark of some tree, or, I mean, when was alcohol invented? I mean, literally like probably thousands of years ago. Mead, we had mead, didn't we? So it was, I think we've always wanted to do that because we know about death and pain, and it's a way to kind of distract ourselves and escape it for a little bit.
Yeah. Why have we developed such a super powerful attraction to distractions? It's the same. Not necessarily with the help of psychotropic substances, but just distraction. It can be entertainment or building some holy temple to venerate or whatever. Distractions. Even nowadays, we have a whole emporium and circles and factory of these available distractions. In every sense, can be 600 channel satellite TV or video games or shopping or food or whatever, including socializing. It's often taking as a distraction. So that's it's almost like we want to escape our brain. We also want to escape the mind. I mean, there are spiritual workshops that are called the no mind. I came across many of them.
Yeah, they see
And
the
it's
mind
true.
as the enemy. They think that the enemy is the mind, and the mind is a nightmare that you need to escape from, or you need to kill, like the ego. It's like, oh my goodness.
There are many gurus there. There are many gurus there that keep on preaching this. The mind is your enemy. Okay, and who are you without the mind?
Yeah.
What? A banana? A vegetable? That's what
I think you are. They are certainly a banana.
Who is the individual that has no mind? They don't say that.
No.
Oh, because it's too complex.
Yeah.
So you are a non-thinker, and that's why you are at the mercy of what your favorite guru is preaching to you. So it is crazy. Instead of trying to escape the mind, or to cloud down the mind with distractions and stuff, or participate in some group activity or something, doing the opposite, like trying to understand not how can the mind match the speed that the brain engages. No, we cannot do that. There is no way.
No.
But how to manage the information processing properly, not perfectly, that is impossible, but properly. Such as, for example, and this is a form of personal training, is very counterintuitive, but if we go for it and we are serious about that, we do really have some progress. Through time, eventually it takes a long time, but it doesn't really matter. There will be some progress in every sense in terms of refinement of thinking skills and thinking deductively instead of inductively, more clarity, and eventually also more peace. So can we somehow train ourselves to value, first of all, quietness? Sober, active quietness. And then we can go through that information processing. Of course, it's counterintuitive because we want to know as soon as we can. In Italy, there is a saying. They say, "I want to know in what way I will die. At least I want to know what will kill me as soon as I can." Is a saying, really? Which means that I want to be so super quick, so at least I know what the problem is. But you want to know what the problem really is eventually. This is a serious problem. We don't have any training to perform this, and it's a massive problem, particularly nowadays that we have overloads of information all over, and that's why we have a problem with emotional processing. Processing of emotions. We have a problem with fake news. We have a problem with populism. We have a problem with people believe all sorts of stuff just because they come across that stuff. The root problem is fundamentally, and that's why I know it sounds simplistic, but I don't think it is. The root problem is to be found and inquired in the speed we use throughout our information processing, whatever that is, including small talk, particularly psychological noise. Also because everything influences us. That is inevitable. So, for example, I'm also influencing you right now because I'm saying something, and also vice versa, and there is nothing wrong with that. But what can be wrong is the way people process the influence. And again, we are not trained to process the influence. But today we have the influencers.
Yeah.
They call it that they don't call it anymore like we had other terms in the past. Gurus, preachers, and now we call them influencers. And it is right somehow because they do influence.
Yeah.
Look at the consequences, like all those girls on Instagram. Influencers, they do influence what?
Stupidity.
Oh, well, they do stupidity. Superficiality. The idea that you can make a living, you can become even somehow famous by doing absolutely nothing, just taking pictures of selfies.
Yes.
It's something we never had in the past. It was unconceivable in the past. To become a celebrity with no talents whatsoever.
Yeah. You know, they're interfering with our information processing and our ecology in a really detrimental, damaging way.
You know, this is a very complicated matter because emulation is the pattern of the many, or imitation, but more emulation. Now there is a biological reason why we emulate. Animals do the same.
When you say emulate, do you mean like mimic, like similar to mimic or copy?
I mean, there is a difference between imitating and emulating. Imitating means really considering what another person is doing, and that believing that by doing that person is the person is successful in whatever field by performing this and that, and therefore the imitation. I want to imitate that because I believe that I will also be successful in this and that. Eventually, that can be true. I mean, if you want to run a business, you do have to imitate something. You cannot go wild.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it will collapse the business very soon, or you don't even start it. You do have to imitate technically, eventually. Like commercialism is fundamentally based on imitation, like most websites, they look like pretty much all the same.
Yeah.
That is kind of bad because that is the illusion of succeeding. Eventually, I mean, that will create, just like it's doing right now, an overwhelming amount of identical approaches in order to plan something or everything, podcasts, whatever. Movies, everything, and then becomes overwhelming and it's not successful at all because there is no originality and no creativity whatsoever. But emulation instead is not doesn't necessarily require an intellectual process. Politics repackages all the ideologies, trying to propose them in a modern form, and you know, I mean, people are young, life is short, and most people don't have historical thinking, and don't have a decent education about history that is very complicated. So they are unable to see when something is not original at all. It's just a repackaged construct proposed in a modern form. They go for it.
Yeah.
How many people, particularly teenagers, how many people are prone to just embrace and jump into some group identity? Say, "Oh wow, this is the revolution." Yeah, this is the. In every form, can be political, can be spiritual. The ascension or whatever. Look at the ascension, for example. It's nothing but the they didn't even change the name. The Christian Ascension is the rapture.
Yeah.
The New Age Ascension is raising your vibrational field, and so to enter another dimension. That is the same.
Yeah, so it's a repackaging of the rapture to a new audience who
the second coming is what the spiritual people will call the global spiritual awakening. Is the same, just repackaged differently with different meanings.
So you say that is imitation, or is it emulation?
So imitation in the human experience is mimetic replication. We all do that. We usually do that technically, and that is okay. So if you want to learn how to cook a specific food, eventually you will watch a tutorial, and then you are going to imitate, and that's okay. Or if you want to learn something, learn how to play guitar or something, or whatever. That's why we have courses, and that's why we have schooling that is about learning, and learning is mainly based on imitation and replication, eventually with variations that produce some betterment. That's good. First of all, we have to keep in mind that we all think to be smarter than what we actually are. That doesn't mean we have to think in terms of modesty, in modest terms. That means that it's very good to challenge the way we process information, first of all, personally. And it's very good to dare trying to not to ignore what makes us feel good, but to keep it separated from the process of reasoning. Because eventually that can be an interference. Actually, it usually is an interference. That which is what makes us lazy or distracted or noisy. So the point is that back to imitation and emulation, we mainly focus on imitation in every sense. If we look at a culture or a group or a tribe or even a family, people imitate what people do in a family environment.
Yeah.
They imitate. Maybe it's not very visible, but they imitate various things. Like if there's a girl and a boy, the girl will probably develop a propensity to imitate patterns that have to do with what a female do, what a female does, what a girl does. Can be imitating, some kind of cooking, or imitating the Barbie, or imitating, the dancer. And boy does something slightly different, imitating the superhero, imitating the driver, or the cop, or the Batman, or the Star Wars character, and so on. That is not emulation. It's not, how can a boy imitate? How can a boy possibly emulate a character like Batman? Batman has meanings.
Yeah.
There is justice there, a superhero. So, for example, we don't really see a boy emulating Satan, the devil, unless it's Carnival, or emulating a serial killer. But that would be concerning, actually. Why the boy does that? Because eventually it's disturbed. That is imitation. It's not emulation.
Okay.
There are meanings that eventually should be understood properly. Maybe ideas of power or weird stuff.
Okay. So is animals just kind of blindly mimicking other animals is emulation? So there's no reasoning behind it. There's no meaning to it. They're just looking at it and thinking, I want to do that. And that's it.
That means that there is no intellectual process involved. Like I see that cat successfully finds food by performing that behavior. Therefore, I get conditioned by that, and therefore I'm going to emulate the same behavior. Hopefully, well, the hopefully is not there. That is an intellectual construct. But just to say this, hopefully, I will succeed equally, and I will get the milk, the food, whatever. There is not. It's very mechanical. There is no intellectual process there. So this concept of self-awareness is very complicated because we don't know what consciousness is. So we are talking about something, using it as a parameter without even knowing what that actually is. I mean, are humans self-aware, by the way? So, and it's not a sarcastic question. I think I would say yes, definitely most people are self-aware, but are there humans that are not self-aware? Well, I'm not saying they are sick or something, or they are in coma or something, but really it depends what we mean by self-awareness. It's not about knowing that we do exist. It's not I think therefore I am. It's not that. What is self-awareness? What do we mean by that?
Yeah.
It's very complex. So, am I aware I do exist? Yes. Okay. Because of that, am I self-aware? Well, wait a minute. I'm not quite sure if I can say that. We are definitely aware of our thought patterns. But are we aware of our thinking, assuming there is a thinking there? That requires a considerable magnitude of intelligence. And also, very soon, machines will be pretty much able to think. So is that thinking? Is that self-awareness? I will say yes. Still, it's nebulous because we don't know what awareness, we don't know what we really mean by awareness. So really, are we aware? For example, are we aware whether we have a healthy mind or not? That is a very important point. No, yes. Some people will say, of course, what are you trying to say, that I'm sick? Well, yes, we all are sick. That's a matter of fact. Mentally speaking, we all are sick.
Yes.
It's a fact. Who can dispute that? We have control. We are not pathologically sick. We are not medically sick. Well, some people are.
Yeah.
But we have contradictions. We have irrationality.
Yeah.
We have
we're very
some
bipolar.
kind of
we seem to be very bipolar. And also very emotional. And not very rational. Not very as you say, very quick to jump to conclusions which are quite often erroneous. But because some of us are aware that we've got, mental issues and we're not healthy in our minds. And some people don't realise that. But isn't that being aware that you're unwell, there's something wrong in your mind and your thinking, isn't that self-awareness, even though you're not healthy? Actually being sick and being aware of that makes you more self-aware?
I don't know. That is a dilemma. When we are physically sick, are we aware of that? Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we will. Otherwise, we will have a serious problem. Now, when we are mentally sick, are we aware of that?
It depends how bad it is, I guess.
Of course.
But sometimes it can be really bad and you're just not aware of it, like I was at the time when you're going through it. It's not a full awareness. It's a very slight inkling.
Okay, so therefore, what we mean by awareness, really? So, for example, when there is a problem, are we? Do we have a perception that something is not quite right?
Yes.
Or are we aware of the problem as it is?
No, we're not aware of the problem as it is, generally speaking. But we are aware that something isn't right. Something's off.
So if I believe in all sorts of absurd new age ideas, I actually believe in that. I'm a spiritual, I'm raising my vibrations and whatever the stuff is. Now, maybe I am intelligent enough to acknowledge that I've been like this for 10 years, 20 years, and nothing really beneficial quite happened. So I perceive somehow, despite my denial or my recognition bias, I perceive that there is something quite right.
There's a limited kind of perception of the fact that there's something not right, but because of your beliefs and the time and the investment into it, there's also the denial, which is the interference, which stops you from fully or more deeply being aware of the problem.
Right.
It interferes with that.
We cannot. If a person like that is your partner, your friend, or a family member, there is no. Well, you have a very, very super small chance to assist that person because the person is an image of you that will block any attempt, rational attempt to assist that person. If there are eventually the people or the sources that can assist that person, the approach will be, okay, you perceive there is something somehow off or not quite right, and you also do have some evidence because nothing really happened. With all of the beliefs of yours, nothing really happened. So, but are you aware you are sick? It's always super strong to convey something like that.
Yeah, I don't think. Yes, you're right. You're probably not aware of how ill you are. You probably wouldn't call yourself ill or sick or unwell, but actually you are. Yeah.
When a person is in a cult, if a person is relatively intelligent, the person sort of perceives there is something quite off. But the person cannot.
But they can't really. Yeah, they're so clouded and there's so much interference and there's so much confusion. They're not able to verbalize it or really understand it or really comprehend it properly.
Yeah. So they are not aware of the reality.
Yeah.
of the problem, the actuality of the problem for what it is. Maybe they think, how many times are we, I mean, aside of the matter of cults and something, but how many times are we prone to say, yeah, there are problems, we have problems, particularly in a couple, we have problems, but we don't say, what is the problem? The root problem.
That's a good point.
There cannot just be problems here and there. They grow like mushrooms. What is the problem? Is it that you think in a certain way and neglecting the reason about whether that way is a proper way to think? Is that a problem? But we have to go into all this stuff. So what is... So if I'm not... the point I'm trying to make is that if I'm not... we all have problems, and the world problems, and personal problems. If I'm not aware of the problem, for what the problem is, now, what does it mean to be self-aware then?
So you're saying if you're not aware of the root problem as it really is in actuality, in reality, then you're not self-aware, because you can't be if you're not aware of that root problem.
If we take a religious person, not
oh my God, that's very controversial.
But it is, but it's very important. So if I am not necessarily a heavily religious person, or an ideological person, or whatever. Now, a person and another person asks me, "Are you self-aware?" And I will say yes. And then another person asks me, "Are you self-aware of what? What are the subjects?" I'm self-aware of me being a patriot, a Christian, a Russian, an American person, an Italian, a French person. I'm self-aware of me being a man because I identify myself as a man. Not necessarily because I am biologically. So I am self-aware of me. I'm self-aware of regarding myself. Ignoring that myself is
mimetic.
the result of the condition. So am I self-aware? That's the question. What does it mean to be self-aware? If I'm aware of what I believe I am, but I'm not aware of the conditioning that is behind that, am I self-aware? Or am I living in a self-manufactured reality? A simulation?
That's a very good question. That's very deep. That's true. So people aren't... So you're saying that people aren't really self-aware because they're aware of their memes, the mimetic conditioning that they've had, that they're a Christian or a, I don't know, New Age person or British, but they're not aware of the conditioning and the ideology behind that, or the belief system behind that.
That's right. So that we have to be very careful with self-awareness. The point is that, am I self-aware? I definitely am aware of my own life and how I'm living it. But am I aware I'm living in a simulation? And if I'm not, am I self-aware? Well, I will say no. How can I be self-aware if I don't even comprehend that I'm living in a simulation? And I think that is the right way to live, to be. And all the other people are wrong if they don't live that way. They're maybe nice people. They're human beings. They have to be respected. But they are intrinsically wrong. They live wrongly. Am I self-aware? How can I be self-aware if my thinking is monodirectional and monodimensional? I'm not self-aware. I'm only aware of what I want to be aware of. And is that self-awareness? Well, there's definitely consciousness, whatever we mean by consciousness. But it's very limited. And it is based on mimetic replication and imitation. Because how can I be Christian if nobody else is Christian in the world? That will be, I will probably think I have a mental illness.
Yeah.
Or some.
Yeah.
So, how can I believe in the most crazy stuff that I'm raising my vibrations if nobody believes that? I have to imitate somebody else, or more or less organize the construct of believing and the ideas about self-awareness. And therefore, I'm not a thinker; I'm an imitator. So,
and this is the irony, is that the New Age people say we're the ones who are self-aware. Other people, are asleep and they're not aware, and we're the aware ones. And actually, they're not at all. They're not self-aware.
Yeah.
They're only aware, as you say, of what they want to be aware of, which is very limited. It's all mimetic. It's mimetic awareness, or maybe not even that. Sometimes they're not even aware of their ideologies and their beliefs and the memes that they carry around.
No, usually they're not aware. Usually they're not. That's why, for example, non-religious people usually know way better the structure of, for example, the contents of religious books than religious people. Why? Or non-spiritual people, they know way better the ridiculousness of New Age and spiritual beliefs. And they know what is behind also the critical thinking behind that, the confirmation bias and blah, blah, blah. But most people that believe in absurd things, they're not really aware of the contents. They just imitate and they replicate. Like, for example, in the US, most people cling to the mantra, "In God we trust." And most of those people, if not all of them, they don't even know that the term God is not even in the American Constitution. There is no mention of any kind of God or Jesus or religious content in the American Constitution. But they don't know that.
Right. So what? So where has that come from then?
Well, from the generational imprinting and the way our religious thinking has infected the original idea of the founding fathers of America had about the country and how to develop the country. And then it became a country where the policy making is directly, or more or less directly, intertwined with faith.
Yeah.
And they think that has been like that since the very beginning.
Well, yeah, because it depends. People say, well, it depends what you mean by self, because it could mean the mimetic self.
The self is always mimetic, unless we consider the physical self, but we don't have even to call it self. That is the body, the living being, the organism. We don't call it self. We call it body. We call it person. We call it organism. We call it human being. But the self is entirely mimetic. What is the self really? If not the package, the construct of what we have been told, what we rejected, the education we received, the culture where we grew up, the upbringing, all the information we assimilated and processed, including movies, people we came across with, but not necessarily bad at that stuff. But the self is a construct of conditioning and influences and interference. That who can deny that, really? And that's why all those people that think, that say and actually think they are free thinkers, I think believing you are a free thinker is being delusional. I see many of people that are, atheists, skeptics, even scientists. They really believe they are free thinkers or critical thinkers. There is no such thing as a critical thinker or a free thinker. That is delusional. Probably critical thinking does exist. Free thinking does not exist. Forget it. It's nonsense. Free thinking is still a belief. So how can belief be free? Oh, gosh.
They should say, like, I'm open-minded. I think maybe they're getting confused. Or maybe they're not quite clear, actually, what is meant by a free thinker. Because I think when people say, I'm a free thinker, I think what they actually mean is they're open-minded to things.
Yeah.
Not so conservative. But yeah, saying a free thinker, as you say, if you really look at it critically and analyse it, it can't possibly be true. But I think that's what they mean by it, but they're just using the language is wrong. But they're unaware of that. They're completely unaware.
Yeah, but I'm sure that if you ask a flat earth believer, are you open-minded? What do you think that person will say? Of course I am. I'm also a free thinker. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which means that it's good to be open-minded, whatever that means, but not too open to allow
nonsense,
all sorts of nonsensical stuff to enter. If you have a child and now the child is a teenager and the child wants a powerful motorbike, will you give the child a motorbike? Which means giving the child the freedom to use that motorbike.
No, never.
Well, good luck with that. I think in the first place, you have to give and you have to teach and you have to make sure the child understood how to handle properly that motor, how to use it. If you don't provide that to that person, well, good luck with that. Free speech is the same. Is that motorbike is very powerful, way more powerful than a motorbike. Can kill people, can make people delusional, can make people suicidal, can make people utterly stupid.
It's inviting all mental illnesses and mental disorders. It's really frightening that it's becoming so mainstream and so widespread. And it's not just on the fringes anymore, just like in the New Age community and a few people there kind of believing these really wacky, crazy, nonsensical beliefs, but now becoming really mainstream. That's really, really frightening.